Welcome to another edition of the CDG BizCast. I'm your host, Christian Gonzalez, co-owner of Creativity Design Group, a digital marketing firm in Houston, Texas. Today we'll be discussing service, the dying art. Is customer service truly dying in this day and age? Chef Michael Brown of Jamburritos joins us today to discuss the importance of bringing your A game when it comes to serving your customers properly. And also joining us today is lifestyle expert and former retail and fast food worker, Justin Rayl. Is customer service a dying art? If the answer to that is yes, then what are we doing to make that better? Customer service doesn't have to be a dying art. In fact, it is up to everybody involved to make it an art form. Every company has a different way of handling customers. They all have their own strategies and methods to make sure that the customer is satisfied. More importantly, that the customer is satisfied to the point that they're telling all their friends, and also as a result sending you more customers and retaining the initial customer as a repeat customer. Customer service does not have to be a dying art. In fact, if you feel that it is within your company, it's up to you, the business owner, to ensure that everybody involved, especially your frontline employees, are trained to make sure that the customer is taken care of in the best possible manner. So Michael, I would like to talk to you first. What do you have to say about customer service being an art form? And could you please share a few examples of how customer service is an art form based on what you've seen from your own personal interactions, as well as how you have perfected customer service during your tenure as a restaurant owner?
Yes, thank you so much, Christian, for having us on your podcast show. I'd like to say welcome to Justin as well, Justin Rayl. And what we're going to really try to talk about today is this title, Service, the Dying Art. And there is a question mark at the end. So being an optimist, I'd like to say that while service has improved over the last 30 or 40 years, whether you're in the restaurant business or whether you're in the retail business, it has improved, but it has not improved exponentially as much as it could improve. And in some cases and in some industries, there's been a shift. Okay, there's been a lack of professionalism and a lack of in-depth concentration on the industry's skill sets. And that one happens to be the restaurant industry. I remember back in New York when Marbell was the major telephone company on the East Coast, you pretty much didn't want to call customer service because you could get treated poorly and it was very a bad experience. And you always felt like you were, you were being abused most of the time. Now we have cell phone service companies with customer service where they try to do the right thing. But what I want to really emphasize here is how do we as entrepreneurs, as business owners, ensure that it is not a dying art, and how do we as entrepreneurs, whatever industry we're in, make sure that people that are working the front lines for us are providing excellent customer service. So one of the things that we have to understand is that we've had a shift in the labor market. We've had younger people working, we've had younger managers, and they don't necessarily have the same experience that we once had. When I was coming up in the restaurant industry, it was a profession to be a New York waiter. It was a profession to go to work with all of your tools in your pocket, preparing to serve people in a professional manner. And so we don't see as much of that today. So what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with a different labor force. And I would venture to say that the labor force we're dealing with has all the capabilities of providing excellent service just as much as we did, but we have to communicate these ideals in a different way. When is the best time as a business owner to instill customer-centric values into your business? And that's the inception of your business plan. So you have to be intentional about customer service being at the top of your goals and your company values. Customer service. Without customers, we're not in business. So I think that's really important. I think that when we start to train people, we have to think about how to communicate to them at their level. Most of the people that are working today in various industries, they grew up with computers in front of them, and their interaction with people was limited and more so than we had in our past experiences. And so they have to be communicated in such a way where, it's technological. Also, they've been brought up to think that they were the terminal generation. So we have to communicate to them in a way that empowers them, that makes them feel like they are worth something when they're actually facing our customers, when they're doing the work that we've asked them to do. I recorded a great customer service experience the other day I had at Bath & Body Works, and I'm not sure, Christian, if you want to play it, but I can summarize it. I was in a Bath & Body Works. Everybody in there was giving great customer service. And I asked the young lady, how does this happen? How did you do this? Why are you guys so customer centric? And she said that it's because her bosses treat her well. It's because they give her product to take home and to test. It's because they applaud her when she's sharing her experiences with the products to the customer. And so she's satisfied in her job and she's happy to be there. And she's therefore giving that over to the other people that are coming in to be served. So that's really important. What effect does good customer service have on the lifetime value of a customer? Well, if you didn't know this before, bad experiences are shared with other people 10 times more than good experiences. So when you have a happy lifetime customer, because we all want to measure our business based on the lifetime value. How often will this person come and patronize me, and for how long? In order to keep that lifetime value longer, it's going to require great customer service. I mean, how many of us will go back to a restaurant where the food is mediocre, but the service is outstanding? Now flip the script. If the service is terrible and the food is good, many of us will decide, I'm not going to go through that, because guess what? The first person you're going to run into is the service person that you had before, or somebody like them. You're not going to get the food first. You're going to get the service first, and it's going to make your experience not so great. Another question here is, who are the best person to deliver great customer service? And those are the people that are front facing with your customers. They are the ones, they're the frontliners. They are the ones that are your bread and butter. And in order to make sure your customers are having a good time, they need to be treated well. Motivate our staff to deliver great customer service. Well, there are a lot of different ways. Each person or each generation, ethnicity, and so forth, we all have different ways of being motivated. But one thing that is very important is recognition. Maybe you have an employee of the month. I plan on doing some pretty interesting things to recognize good customer service in my upcoming restaurant. Sometimes it could be just, give them a day off for doing a job well done. I always say that, you praise a person in public and you discipline them in private. It's a good idea to never discipline any of your staff in front of other people, because that just will demoralize them.
It will demoralize them. It'll also cause them to break down to the point that they might just quit their job. I actually have a really good example of that. I read about how after Colonel Sanders sold KFC to private investors several decades ago, he would still come in to check to make sure that his recipe was being followed properly. If the recipe was not followed exactly the way he intended it to be made, he would do a public dressing down of that employee in front of all the customers during a live open restaurant.
And what was the result of that?
I believe the end result was it encouraged people to step up their game more because they were dropping the ball. They didn't like being humiliated. Employees certainly didn't like being humiliated like that, especially when they weren't expecting it to happen. It just encouraged them to do better because they didn't want that to happen again.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, Colonel Sanders would actually embarrass or expose these people in front of others in order to motivate them to to do better. Is that what you said?
Yes, that's right. He would just publicly dress them down, military style, just to show them how bad they were. You could say that he was that decade's Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah. So Justin, if I may ask you, what do you think about that?
I think that's a really honest thing because one of the things that I find interesting, and one of the reasons I left my employer of 7 years when I had been working there ever since they opened, I was one of the original staff on that store. And they had just brought this manager in from another store to fix some behind the scenes management problems at the store. And I was going through a little bit of a rough patch at the time. And he gave me a 75-cent an hour pay raise, the first one I'd ever had at that store. And some of the other employees apparently didn't like that he was handing out raises and accused him of things I knew he wasn't guilty of. And so upper management decided to believe them because they coordinated getting him fired. So I turned in my notice and left. When I left, that store ended up having to hire 20 to 30 new people to replace the amount of work I was putting into that particular Wendy's. Upper management was not happy. They still haven't been the same. I have not gone back to that location since.
Sure. So I would argue that in today's age, the Colonel Sanders, the Gordon Ramsays of the world will not be able to maintain successful businesses with that kind of style. It makes for good television, but you just, in my experience, and I started back in the 80s, actually the 70s, and I've been through all of the different types of chefs. I've been an executive chef myself. I've, thrown plates. I've done all these crazy things and such like that. But I've learned that in the last 15 years that was not an effective way of motivating people. So I think that we have to look at the current workforce that we have and figure out how to continue to connect with our customers through the workforce, the labor force that we currently are working with. One of the things that I have instilled in my company is a thing called TAGS, Training at a Glance, TAG. And that is based on a concept that I noticed that Starbucks has and other companies where you're making things simple, stupid. So a tag is a sign that's by the register or by the door or any place where customer service is going on that lets the staff members visually see it and know what to do. It could be in the form of a timer that tells the Starbucks employee it's time to change the creamer. It could be in the form of how you greet a guest. It could be a form of how you give the food to the guest. So, and the reason why that's important and the reason why that can contribute to great customer service is because a lot of times our current work staff is not as focused when they walk on the job about the job they're about to do. When I used to wait tables, I would prepare almost an hour ahead of time, with all of the different things and prepare in my head what I was going to do. There's so much more distraction going on. People with the cell phones and all these other things in their ears, you can't expect them to be 100% focused on your company when they get there. But when they do get there, you can help them to multitask and to have a mindset of multitasking by making training at a glance available to them. So that's one thing that we're going to do. I noticed I was watching a movie recently with it was about two guys who lost their jobs and went to work for Google. They were older, and when they got to work for Google, actually it was an internship, and they went to an internship, meaning not paid, but it was a summer paid, and if they made it, there was a contest, and if they made it, they would become on staff. And what they walked into was a whole different work environment. I think if we're going to provide great customer service, we have to think outside the box. For years and years and years, every restaurant is built the same, every office is built the same. You can tell what the library looks like, but when you go into Google, you see, swings and slides and basketball courts and different things that stimulate the employee environment to a point where everybody is happy to be there. and more productive. So what can we do as entrepreneurs and business owners to encourage our workforce? First, one thing I must say that we have to have empathy. There's great customer service and how important that is to the lifeline of your business. Sometimes we have companies that don't seem to care about great customer service, but somehow they're expanding and somehow they're growing. I sometimes wonder, and I guess I would ask some entrepreneurs a question, what's more important, the product or the service? And some will say, we make the best bicycles or we make the best hamburgers in the world. And then others will say things like, well, we make sure that our customers walk out happy every time, that they have a value that they've received that's so important, so great. This is what I believe. There's a thing called table stakes. Table stakes is if you're a restaurant, you're going to produce food in a clean environment, food that is healthy to eat, food that is appealing to the eye, food that is tasty, food that is served in a reasonable amount of time. Those are table stakes. Service, on the other hand, the table stakes there are when I walk in the door, you're going to greet me, you're going to serve me, you're going to give me what I asked for, and hopefully you'll say thank you on the way out. Great customer service goes above and beyond that. What it does is it takes that experience that would normally be table stakes for the customer and meets them and elevates that experience for them as needed. And when I say as needed, because it requires a certain amount of emotional intelligence to know what that need is and empathy to understand it from the customer's perspective. I'll give you an example. One time, I had a lady come into my restaurant who said she was coming down with a cold. So without having any further conversation with her, I said I would be right back. And I went in and got some Grand Marnier and some oranges, mixed them together, brought out my little portable stove, got the skillet hot, and flambéed the Grand Marnier for her. And then they gave it to her to drink. That was on me. That was something I went above and beyond. And when she drank it, she says, oh, wow, I feel better now. That's extraordinary service. That's what we want to see happen in almost every interaction that we have with other people in our businesses. And you need to applaud that staff that actually exemplifies that and make sure that they're being recognized for that. With that being said, we're going to open it up for group discussion between Justin and Christian and myself. And we'll start to chit chat about some topics regarding great customer service and service, the dying art.
Well, Michael, one thing I want to mention about one of the questions that you asked and answered earlier, when are we supposed to start implementing great customer service? That's basically the moment you open your door. When are we supposed to be, or actually, when are we supposed to start instilling customer-centric values in our business? The answer to that question, and I hope every business owner who is listening understands this, the answer is the moment you open your doors to the public for business. You should always be customer-centric, focused on their needs and what they want. It's not about you, it's about what they want. Some businesses sadly do make it all about the business owner, and therefore the focus is all on profit rather than customer satisfaction. Well, guess what? If you have customer satisfaction that's extraordinarily different, they're going to start sending more people to your business, and then you can see profits grow that way. You should never ever take your focus off the customer. Your customers should always be your main focus no matter what. Without customers, you have no business. You have no money. Put your focus where it belongs.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree with you. I would just add to that before your doors open, when you conceptualize your business plan, there needs to be a plan of action or to how you're going to achieve those goals of great customer service, because you can't just wing it. One of the things that we're doing here is that before we open, 6 months before we're opening, we're already recruiting staff that will be able to walk right into the training process before we open our doors. And you can bet your bottom dollar that each one of those staff members will be inundated with the values and the vision and the goals of the business before they even get to serve the first guests that we have coming in the door. So that's really important. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and we're in a computer generation right now, and I have this little saying: computers or technology is cool, but it is not the rule. And this is just a quick way of communicating priorities to our staff. Okay, so if a computer goes down, or say somebody comes up and they say, I really want that particular item, but can you have an extra piece of meat thrown on there, or can you do this? And the person says, sorry, I can't do that. My computer won't let me. Now that's not a good look. That's not a good look. It has to be a way that was pre-thought ahead of time. Maybe the computer is programmed with, an a la carte item that you can add on, or at least you can go to your manager and say, I want to service this guest. How can I make it happen? So there's a lot that we sometimes depend on computers for, but I always say you always have to have an emergency kit. Computer goes down, go back to pad and paper, right? But you can't sit there like a deer in front of headlights and basically make the customer suffer for something that you didn't prepare for. That makes sense?
That's right.
I'm a big believer in not just customer loyalty, but also employee loyalty. That's why I haven't been back to that Wendy's. Well, one of the reasons anyway, is because I knew that since they did not value me as an employee, they weren't going to value me as a customer either.
Our last episode of BizCast focused on how too much AI can create a lot of problems in the customer service realm. So you're right about that. You and me both went to lunch last month at a certain Cajun restaurant, and if you recall, I ordered a shrimp po' boy, and they told me it came with either fries or gumbo, and I asked the waiter if they could substitute red beans and rice for the gumbo, and he told me that his handheld toast tablet could not allow the substitution, so I had to order it as a separate item, which in my eyes, I thought that was not right, that they were allowing technology to put so many limitations over what they could and couldn't do, and that's how you create problems with customer service. If you have too much AI and not enough human interaction, I guarantee your customer service plan is going to fail. You need to be able to accommodate every customer that you get. And Justin, what you were saying about Wendy's, I understand exactly where you're coming from, and you're right. If they're not putting the same amount of dedication into their employees, then how do you expect them to serve the customer properly, right? You can expect customer service to be horrible. You know that if a customer goes in there and wants to order, maybe they just want to order a Frosty, something small, they're probably going to be sitting there for over 30 minutes or longer over an item that only takes no more than a few minutes to get, because all they have to do is put the cup on the dispenser, pull the handle, and it comes out in no more than a few minutes. And I guarantee you that customer who wants that Frosty is going to be sitting there for 30 minutes because the employees are doing who knows what in the back instead of making that Frosty.
You guys, yeah, that's some really good stuff there. So who would you say when you go into a restaurant or you go into a department store and get bad customer service, who would you blame?
I'd say that it goes vertical both directions. If the employees are mistreating the management's going to mistreat the employees, and the customer service is going to go down because nobody's willing to deal with the customers at that point, because everybody's fighting with each other inside the company, and that's why it's going to go out of business at that point, because nobody's going to want to shop there because of a toxic work environment where they know they're not going to be treated well by the employees. That's why you've got to hire for attitude and train for experience. You have to hire people with the right attitude, because the right attitude cannot be trained into people.
And I can appreciate that. One of the things that I'm trying to bring out here is who's ultimately responsible for great customer service. And I take a quote from John C. Maxwell. He says, everything rises and falls with leadership. So let's say I go into a restaurant or have you, and I get bad customer service. I know that the strings are pulled from the top down. And so while I may try to educate that server or whoever it is to hopefully help elevate their understanding, I know ultimately that I have to go to the very top in order to see change. And so when you have leadership that doesn't understand that, then they don't do what they have to do to empower you to make great decisions for your guests. So we have to remember that, as entrepreneurs, as leaders in our companies, that people they're going to follow us. They're going to follow how we do. If we treat them well, they'll treat their guests well. If we give them the tools to do their job, they will appreciate it and be able to work more efficiently. So I always look at anybody that's out there doing or saying silly things is that either they were a bad hire, to your point, Justin, in the first place, and somebody had no business putting them in front of a customer, or they were just poorly trained, or they were perhaps trained well, but they had become jaded because management just doesn't respect them or treats them poorly.
I've actually been down that road myself, and I'm actually going to save that topic for another episode, but I know exactly what you mean about being jaded because you were treated poorly like management, and I have a whole separate episode planned on that. But it is important to make sure that when you hire people, you know what you're getting yourself into. You need to review everything about them. And when it comes to shifting the blame up to management, most of the time that's where it ends up going. You're right, Michael. For me personally, when I get bad service, the first person that I immediately get upset with is the person who treated me that way. Conversely, when I get treated like royalty, when I don't expect to be treated like royalty, again, I give all the credit to that one employee who did that. And you may remember, Michael, that when we were sitting down eating lunch, I shared with you an example about that. Do you remember that?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You also remember that I shared with you an example where I was treated terribly going to Popeyes.
Yeah, I remember that very well. That was bad customer service on steroids. You know, that was terrible. That should have never happened to anyone. I wanted to also mention the fact that understanding your work labor force is really something that I've had to really embrace because I'm very old school. And I was like, man, I came up and I dedicated my life to this and you should be able to do it too. And all you got to do is, have great work ethics. But we have to understand that these children had been raised to be privileged. And I have this saying that is privileged often produces apathy. Privilege often produces apathy. And so how do you deal with apathy? Every person can be, I believe, most people can be retrained, reprogrammed. And apathy, I think the way you deal with apathy is through hope, right? So an apathetic person is typically hopeless, thinking that, well, you know what, I'm doing this, but it doesn't really matter. Or, the sky is falling, and so I don't really care. I'm just here just punching the clock. But when you give them something to look forward to, and you give them, as Justin said earlier, a way to elevate their lifestyle through the company that they're working for, you can change apathy into energy, into excitement, into passion. Everybody has something. You just got to find a way to bring it out in them.
Exactly, because if you're willing to put it into your employees that they think you as the business owner are going to be loyal to them, they will not only be loyal to your company, but they will be loyal and friendly to your customers. Because it's, as Sam Walton once said, there's only one boss in a company, and that's the customer, because it is the customer's wallet when they spend money at your company that signs the paycheck.
That's exactly right. It's important to make sure that you have customer-centric frontline employees. In fact, I want to give a shout out right now. As the owner of a graphic design company, I often need to get signs printed. I need to get business cards and other similar printed materials made. I want to give a shout out to Erin over at FedEx office on West Park and Buffalo Speedway in Houston. She is the perfect example of someone who is customer-centric, customer-focused, and overall just flat out nice, kind, friendly. She puts 1,000,000% into what she does, and let me tell you why. I drive to this location, which is a good 15 miles away from my house, to get my prints made because she goes the extra mile to make sure that my stuff gets done properly. She makes sure that the colors come out sharp enough. She makes sure that every little detail comes out just right, and of course she'll even add her own personal touch to your project. She often gives suggestions. She's all about making sure that the customer is served properly. I've been to several different FedEx office locations, but this one is by far my favorite, and I have not gone to any other since. So you could see what a difference great customer service has on the customer. This is just reiterating back to what you said earlier, Michael, and I had to share that because every time I go to the FedEx office on West Park, Erin always gets me taken care of. She always puts 1,000,000% into what she does.
I agree. And I remember Dad Pace and Wendy's when I was working there. Because I was working there and I was one of the more well-known people in that town, half the town ended up shopping there because they'd stop by to talk to me when I wasn't busy with in the middle of project while on the clock. So sometimes even on my days off, I'd go over there just to talk with the customers.
And that's good. We've got lots of choices. If you have bad customer service at one place, go somewhere else. There are a lot of choices in this world. You don't have to stick with store A if they gave you bad service. Thank you guys once again for attending the BizCast. Y'all had some great advice. It was a pleasure having you both on the show. And I hope that all the business owners who are listening right now will understand that you need to make sure that you are 1,000,000% ready to start serving your customers with the utmost respect, that you're ready to acknowledge every single need they could possibly have. If you are not customer centric, you should not even bother being in business.